Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a mean machine in red and black. Mean machine in red and black. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Ain't nothing finer in the land. Them Georgia obnoxious Georgia fans. Them Georgia obnoxious Georgia fans. Go, go! Go, go! Go, go!
What's up, y'all? This is John back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast. I'm joined by Sarthak Sharma to talk about the upcoming game this weekend against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Before we get to that, how you been? What are you drinking?
Hey, I have been doing well. Yeah, I am drinking some Eagle Rare 10 here.
Oh, there you
You
go.
can see next to the blurry. Yeah, it's a go-to for a nice midweek break.
Awesome. Yeah, if you are new to the show, we talked to Sarthak before that game in Starkville 2 years ago now, is it?
2 years ago, that's right.
Absolutely. So you went to Mississippi State for undergrad and then law school at Georgia, correct?
That is correct.
So individual divided this week.
Little bit, I as much as I do love the Georgia Bulldogs, I feel like I have a little bit more of a personal connection to the undergrad. You're a little bit more in the weeds there, a little more in trenches. So I'm pulling for Mississippi State, but I think we all know where this goes.
Are you going to the game this weekend?
I'm not going to the game. So I am actually expecting my first child this weekend.
Congratulations. That's
Yes,
awesome.
thank you. Yeah, so our due date is October 13th, which is actually also my wife's birthday. So as much fun as it would be to be in the stadium to have my child and cement his status as a football fan, I think my wife might be a little against it.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a great argument to not be there for this game.
Fingers
But
crossed, maybe it does not come on Saturday because it is a great slate of college football.
or just like Sunday, like after the last game hits zeros, boom, let's
Yes.
go.
That's the plan. I'm just gonna try to manifest that into reality.
Yeah, I had a friend who recently he and his fiance just had their first, and the baby was due. He's a Bama fan. Baby was due the day of Bama Georgia, and she went into labor 4 days early. And he was like,
Oh
"Man, I've
wow.
never been so happy to get a phone call from my wife freaking out while I was at work."
I'm sure he was fist pumping in the air there.
Yeah, he did bring a baby home to a house with no power that weekend, so
Eh, they win
yeah.
some, you lose some.
Um, all right, so I finally finished all my Buffalo Trace single barrels that I've got. So I'm on a Elijah Craig toasted barrel. Just
Ooh,
pulled with me having to go to work in the morning. I wanted to get something that was not barrel proof, which is mostly what I have in my cabinet over here. So I was like, "What's Oh, that starts with a 9. We'll go with that one today."
perfect. Yeah, you can't go wrong there.
All right, so getting into this game against Mississippi State, one of the biggest stories for this year's Mississippi State team is getting Jeff Lebby's offense and culture installed. So, have you noticed a difference in the team this year versus last year?
There has been a difference. If you look on paper, I think you're going to see, oh, okay, well, this is a team that's getting blown out by Toledo. They're losing big to Florida. They lose by multiple touchdowns to Texas. But if you actually give it the eye test, what you're seeing is a team that's not really given up. They're missing tackles. It's a real talent issue there because the cupboard was left bare when Zach Arnett exited and headed to the rival. But if you watch the games, you're seeing a real turnaround from an effort perspective. Players aren't giving up. They may not be tackling as well, but they're not giving up on plays. We're seeing an offense that is at times delivering on the Showtime vibes that Levy wants to install. The defense is struggling, but all in all, if you look at how this team played last year versus how they're playing this year, they're putting up more points. The defense is better than it was marginally. And generally, the team at times looks more competitive. They essentially looked a lot more competitive against Texas. I mean, that was a 36-point spread, and I think the final score was around 36-12, something around there. So, they say, good teams win, great teams cover.
Hell yeah, love that. Another kind of story that developed during the season, Blake Shapen going out, who, a lot of people were skeptical about him to begin the season, myself included, but he was like top three in the SEC in passing until he got hurt. But then the team turned to Michael Van Buren against Texas. He had a pretty good day considering that was his first start and, the opponent that is Texas this season. But with having a bye week after his first start, what do you expect to see from him going into this game?
So one of the big things I think with Jeff Lebby, as opposed to a lot of other coaches, especially the last couple of coaches that Mississippi State had, I always like to kind of think of a bad coach, in my opinion, would rather lose his way than win someone else's way. And I think Arnett and Leach showed at times that tendency, whereas Jeff Lebby is more adaptive. And I think we saw that against Texas. The fast-paced nature of the offense that he had at UCF, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, you saw it at times here, but against Texas, knowing that Van Buren was really new, really raw, first start against the number one team in the nation, you couldn't leave him high and dry in a fast-paced scenario. The couple times they did try to go fast-paced, they had delay of game penalties. So you saw the team slow it down. Mississippi State had way more time of possession than Texas. I think you're going to see that same game plan play out against UGA. Try to control as much of the clock as possible. Try to get it down to the last 2 or 3 seconds before you snap it. Give the defense a break and try to get Van Buren to be as settled into the game as possible, so that the freshman jitters don't get the best of him.
So moving into the rushing attack just a little bit, Mississippi State has kind of been middle of the road running the ball this year. Do you think that is a scheme thing or player issue?
So it's one of those, again, where what's on paper is a little different than what the eye test would reveal. So the team didn't start off the year at all running the ball well. They struggled. They didn't get a lot of push off the line. But from Florida and then Texas, the rushing game has actually come alive a lot more. They basically got 200 yards rushing against Texas if you don't count the sack yards, which is a lot. So that is essential to Jeff Lebby offense working. I think folks think, oh, he's going to throw the ball around the field, but very similar to if you watch Ole Miss's offense, the game doesn't work if you can't run the ball. So the running game has gotten a little bit better. The offensive line is really shaky, especially at left tackle. So that still is going to need constant improvement. I don't really know if the current line is going to be what the end of the season will show. But for right now, I think the rushing attack is doing better than it did at the beginning of the year.
So going back, digging into that offensive line just a little bit more, they've struggled to protect the quarterback this season, allowing 19 sacks. Do you think they can improve on that, or is it just waiting until guys get healthy?
I think it's going to be more waiting until some of the backups get healthy, because honestly, at this point, the offensive line is what Jeff Lebby wanted it to be. We brought in McKellen Pounders from Memphis as a transfer for left tackle, who was really highly regarded coming out of the portal. Mississippi State had originally tried to get him before he had committed to Memphis, and bringing him in, he did really well at Memphis. They had a good line. He did well, but he has not been as great this year. But even, Albert Reese, another lineman, he hasn't done well. The whole Ethan Miner at center was graded as supposed to be one of the best centers in the SEC, if not the country, but he has not been great. So I think part of it is just a chemistry issue where you don't have a line that's gelled as well as you wanted to gel. Now, having said that, they have done better the last couple of weeks. And against Texas, it's really hard to blame them for much because it is a great defensive line that Texas has. And I think UGA is going to be similar. This is in all essence a bit of a throwaway game if there are sacks, because this is the toughest part of the schedule. It doesn't get harder than playing Texas and UGA back to back.
Yeah, and it seems like almost every team in the SEC has one of those this season. Like whether it's 2 weeks or it's 5 weeks, going into Florida having the toughest schedule in the history of college football, it just with the expanded teams and everybody playing either Texas or Oklahoma, it's the best conference in the country for a reason, and everybody feels it this year. Nobody's really getting off easy.
Yeah, and it's doubly hard when you have a difficult schedule and you're in a full rebuild, right? Having your fourth, fifth coach now in the last 4 or so years it's tough for any team. If you're Alabama or UGA, I mean Alabama's going through a tough time having lost to Vanderbilt with their second coach in a decade plus, right?
Right.
Mississippi State's on its fourth, fifth now in just the last few years. So it's really tough for kind of a more of a middle to lower end program in the SEC to cycle through so many coaches and expect to then surmount such a difficult schedule.
And then, even I think Mississippi State looked really good first couple of weeks of the year. Yeah, they had that loss to Arizona State, but they, significant comeback attempt in that game. And then Blake Shapen, who he's played for Mississippi State's his third team now. Um, so veteran guy, knows what to do with the football, and then he goes down. You're left with a true freshman. I mean, it doesn't get much more difficult.
It's true. The one bright spot here is that the true freshman we do have is the exact player that Jeff Lebby wants in the offense. He recruited Van Buren to Oklahoma. That was his guy. That was going to be the next star at Oklahoma. And when he came to Mississippi State, he brought him with him. So for the future, Van Buren is the product that Jeff Lebby wants. It's just a matter of getting him the experience he needs. And again, trying to look at the silver lining here, playing Texas, playing UGA. I mean, you're taking your licks against the best players in the country. So, after that, when you're playing Missouri, right, or Ole Miss, I mean, good teams, but it's not the fire that you faced the first couple of weeks.
Right. So digging into the passing game just a little bit more, a lot of wide receivers have very similar numbers. I want to say there's a lot of guys between 15 to 30 catches and a lot of guys between 175 and 300 yards receiving on the season. Which guys have stood out the most to you so far?
It's really been Kevin Coleman and Mario Craver. Kelly Akari was expected to be a big part of the offense, but he's been hurt a good bit of the year. So Coleman and Craver really stepped up. Creed Whittemore was again supposed to be a big part of the offense, but was not, and has now unfortunately taken his kind of red shirt and is most likely going to transfer out. He didn't get very many catches last year, and it's the same situation this year. So it's really two receivers that are getting the bulk of the attention in tough situations. Seydou Traore, who is I think he's British, who's the tight end. He was supposed to be a bigger part of the offense, hasn't been, has had issues with blocking. I think in the Texas game, he had two kind of almost back-to-back whiffs that led to sacks or led to hurries. So he's been a bit of a disappointment, but can catch in some of the medium range catches. But yeah, it's for Mississippi State right now. It's just been getting the ball to Coleman and Craver in tough situations and trying to get Akari healthy enough to be an integral part of the offense.
So going into the defense, defensive line hasn't done all that well this season, allowing an average of 213 rushing yards per game and only having 5 sacks. Is that schematic, or are they lacking guys compared to years past when you're talking about the Chris Jones and Montez Sweats and like the guys that are destroying the NFL is kind of the standard that Mississippi State has set on the defensive line?
There was a time where you could consider Mississippi State to be DLU, right? When you had Preston Smith and Montez Sweat and Chris Jones, and even going back to Fletcher Cox, right? Like you had these big bodies there, fast, quick, aggressive, and Mississippi State was known as a team where maybe you'll win, but you're going to get hit in the face. Now, not so much. So it's both a talent issue and a scheme issue. You can run a 3-3-5 defense if you have Montez Sweat and Preston Smith and Jeffrey Simmons right up front. When you don't have that, running backs are getting to the second level, not even being touched. Isaac Smith, who has heard, hopefully he'll come back, he's safety. He's the leading tackler on the team. When your safety is your leading tackler, that's never a good sign. So the defensive line has been a disappointment. David Turner, who's the defensive line coach, he's the guy that brought in a lot of those OG players. But in the last few years, especially in the transfer portal era, he has not been able to recruit. And it has brought up a lot of questions about maybe his longevity here as well from a tenure perspective.
So the secondary, I hate to keep harping on the struggles, but
Well,
when
that's
it
about
comes
all we can kind of talk about here because it's
to,
everywhere.
yeah, the secondary really needs to improve on that 83rd ranking they have in passing defense. What do you think they can do with current guys to do that?
It's tough. Yeah, there's that meme or that GIF where the guy's just like, I'm getting cooked, right? And that is really most of the secondary. We're in this dual issue where you have a secondary that is giving 10 and 15-yard cushions, but also getting beat deep. So at some point you have to make a change and pick one side of it. So against Texas, you saw the cornerback start pulling up a little bit where the cushions went from 10-15 to maybe 8-10, and they forced Arch Manning to stay in that pocket a little longer because the receivers were going farther. Now on a couple of those he got burned, right towards the end of halftime. He got burned on a deep one, and again I think at the beginning of the fourth quarter burned again. But you don't have corners that are fast enough to keep up with receivers deep. So we're seeing a little bit of a shift to just kind of having the safety be the folks that are handling the deep routes and the corners just pulling up a bit. We'll see how it works against UGA. I don't think that UGA has a Bowers. I don't think they have a just guy that you could just throw it up to and he's just going to make everything happen this year, the way that they have had in previous years. But I don't think that's going to be much of a problem against this Mississippi State defense.
All right, so going into the positive side of it, what are you confident in Mississippi State doing well this weekend?
So I think we're gonna have a good punting game. We Nick Barmira, in all fairness, is actually a really great punter, one of the best punters in the SEC. So from a field position standpoint, I think he gives the defense at least an opportunity to get a 3-and-out without forcing, field goal or getting them too close to the red zone. So there is that decent kicking game, but the running game is getting better. The bye week is allowing players to get healthy. We haven't had a really healthy state team really since the second week. So there is an opportunity for good players, or at least the first string players, to show out. And so we're hoping that Isaac Smith, Kelly Akari, some of these folks get healthy. Van Buren has some options. The running game gets a little bit better. So there are some positives because we had the bye week. So we'll see if they translate on the field.
So what are you most concerned about going into this game?
Ooh, that is a long list. The biggest issue probably is going to be run defense, right? UGA, for however long I can imagine or think back, has been a team that wants to establish the run. Establishing the run really gets everything else going, and it's really going to get Carson Beck more comfortable in the pocket as well. The defensive line for State is not very good, and if you watched any of the Arizona State game, that Scatabo running back they had, I mean, he was a nightmare for the line. He was getting 10, 12 yards a chunk every play. And I think UGA has better running backs than no offense to him, but has better running backs. And so the defensive line is a huge concern.
All right, so we're gonna pick some games. I'll give you the over, or I'll give you the line and the over under. Just asking for a straight up pick here. But starting it off way out west, Ohio State at Oregon. Ohio State current 3.5 point favorite, over under 52.5.
I'm going to take Ohio State here, and I think they win by at least a touchdown. I think that Oregon offense is a bit suspect. I think they've had a couple struggles this year. I think Ohio State a little bit slower coming out of the gate. We saw that in the Iowa game, but when they get going, especially in the second half, like they did, I mean, they blow the tops off of a lot of teams. And I don't think that I think Autzon's going to be a tough place to play. And I think both teams are going to put up some points, but I see Ohio State kind of winning this one, kind of like maybe a 35-28 type game.
Next game, I think, is going to be one of the best of the weekend. Ole Miss at LSU. Ole Miss are 2.5 point road favorites in Death Valley, over under 64.5.
So I here am going to take LSU in a really close game. That 2.5 point spread is really, that's a scary spread. That's a, because this could easily be a 35-32 type game, right? Or it could be even like a 41-40, just right down to the last few seconds. I think it is going to be a high scoring game. I think LSU right now is one of the most underrated teams in the SEC. I think they are putting some things together over there. And I think that early loss took everyone's attention away from them. But I think they are physical. If you looked at the Ole Miss game this past week, the score I think was really not a good indicator of how that game went. I think it was a poorly coached game. South Carolina, I think the quarterback for South Carolina is still a little bit hurt.
Right.
Sellers, I think he's still a little bit hurt. And Ole Miss, I mean, Jackson Dart, he is missing a lot of throws deep. I think LSU is going to be a really physical team. They're going to be more physical than South Carolina was. I think LSU wins this game.
All right,
Which
Red
obviously
River
as a Mississippi
rivalry.
State fan, I'm hoping for.
Red River rivalry, first time in the SEC. Texas versus Oklahoma in Dallas. Texas 14-point favorites, over under 49.5.
Texas covers, and I don't think this one's close. So one of the big reasons why is because I think Ewers is back. I believe he's had enough time to rest. And Arch Manning's been playing really well. And I think Ewers, in my opinion, feels the heat a little bit. I think it's going to drive him to play really well. I think Oklahoma is a team. I know they won against Auburn. They came back, but Tennessee really exposed a lot of the weaknesses that Oklahoma has. That quarterback they have is gutsy. He's fast, but I don't think that he has the throws to get them or to kind of lead them in a shootout against Texas. And I think Texas is going to score a ton of points here. So I could see this being kind of a 45-24 type game.
Oof. All right. Last game, we've been talking about it. Mississippi State at Georgia. Georgia 32-point favorites, over under 53.5.
I know Mississippi State covered when they played Texas. Here, I'd take Georgia. I would bet a lot of money that Georgia covers here. Mostly because I think Georgia's running game is going to run all over Mississippi State. I could easily, because one, Mississippi State's not going to score a lot of points. They are likely going to very similarly have a score the way they'd had against Texas. So think maybe 10 to 14 points. And Georgia, I would guess they're probably going to score about 4 rushing touchdowns. So throw in a couple of receiving touchdowns there as well. I could definitely see the score being kind of mid 40s, close to 50, to maybe like anywhere from a 9 to 12. So it's going to be a beatdown, and I think for Mississippi State, it's going to be a game where you just kind of toss the game film on Sunday.
I think you are currently more confident in Georgia than I am, because I'll be honest, I still don't know which way I'm picking this game. While you were talking about it, I was leaning towards Mississippi State covering that 32.
It's a fair. I think you have a fair argument to do that, because I think while I was talking, another Georgia player actually got pulled over by the police. So he may not even show up.
Man, at this point, reckless driving, fine. Don't hit women. Like that's
don't hit women. Don't hit pregnant women.
Just women in general, I feel like is a good rule of thumb there. I don't think I'm breaking any glass ceilings by saying don't hit women. I think that's just a normal thing to say. And the police report reads wildly different than the charges, but man, just unprovoked violence of any sort is unacceptable when you are the only reliable person on the team, but it's unacceptable in any situation.
It's true. It's a tough look. It's a tough look for Georgia. It's a tough look for Kirby. I don't think it's going to impact that much in the game, but in general, I think a program that maybe needs a little bit more of a culture shift there.
I mean, at this point, the program needs Jesus. Like get
the wheel, right? Jesus, take the wheel.
Get Mark Richt back in there doing some morning prayers, because these boys
need
something.
Yeah, but yeah, so I don't think for the game, I don't think this is going to be very close, but I'm hopeful. I mean, if Diego Pavia can do what he did, maybe Michael Van Buren can dig deep.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and talking to us. It's always a good time. Best of luck this weekend. Hope everybody's happy, healthy. I can tell you that as soon as I tell my wife that you're having a baby, she will want to see pictures as soon as you are willing to send them.
I will absolutely send some photos. I appreciate the warm wishes.
Absolutely. Great talking to you. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we get out of here?
Hail State, go Dogs.
All right. Are you willing to finish the drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan with me? I know you're here for Mississippi State.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Always remember, guys, there's nothing
I
finer
haven't
in
done
the
this in a
land.
while, so yeah.
All right. Always remember, guys, there's nothing finer in the land
The drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.